welcome everyone for another live stream. As you can tell right now, my camera is not on. That's because we got a special guest that we'll be bringing in for a little while, and my camera is being used for that portion of it right now. But before we jump into that conversation, I want to go through my normal setup, my normal introduction that I do for all of these live streams on Fridays. So before I get too far into it, thank you for joining me. It's always great having a community with me. If you're in the chat, come say hi. I've already seen Alex, Steve, John say hi. And then I know there's someone on Twitch there, so whoever you are, come say hi with us. And then, oh, the music is still very loud. Okay, thank you, thank you. This is why I always spend a few moments just rambling before I jump too far into it. And while we get into this, make sure you start sharing this around. We want to get as many people watching as possible. I know I put a link out into Discord channel, but if you know anyone else who's free and can be watching with us, come invite them to join. All right. As always, I want to start off with why I do this presentation. And I actually had an opportunity to talk about this in another presentation I did recently. But the three big pillars here: practice presenting. I think it's good for everyone to have an opportunity to be in front of a camera, get used to what it's like to talk to a larger audience, talk about your expertise and your skills. And it's an uncomfortable thing, but it's necessary for your growth and to show that you are able to speak about the things that you know, right? So that's one. The second thing is a commitment to connecting with the community. I want you to know, all the players, everyone who is part of this wonderful game, that I am there for you. I am there to chat about Genesis. And as the community grows, we will always try to find a way to stay connected with that community. And the last thing is to continuously put out more content about TCG game design. It's a niche space. There's a lot of great people making content about board game design. So I want to leverage their skills, but also add my own expertise into it. Then I want to give a huge shout out to... Oh, okay. I want to give a shout out to all our Patreon supporters. So huge shout out to Andrew, Gunther, Josh... Sorry, I can't see. Jacob, Steven, Will, and Good Time Games for being our top tier supporters. Upcoming month, you will be getting that Win Slash promo. You're all also going to be getting that alternate art Kun, which is going to look absolutely amazing. I just sat down to write the newsletter for this month's Patreon, so I'm really excited to share that with everyone. And then the last thing before we jump into this is talking about Future League. Future League happens every Friday night. It's going to be happening tonight. If you're not part of that server, come reach out to us, let us know, and we will add you to that server. It's very important to get as many of you to come and playtest the game and be part of the community as regularly as possible. So if you are interested in helping grow the game in the right direction, make sure you come join us on Future League. So let's talk about today's conversation. Today, it's not a presentation that I normally do. It's going to be something a little bit different. One of our community members, John Miller, has reached out to say that he wanted to come and actually ask me a few questions about the game design process, everything I've done with Genesis, and just a whole bunch of questions. I know there was a huge list of them. I don't know if we'll be able to get through all of them, but we will try our best to get through as many as we can. Why do I think it's part of this lecture series compared to something like Exploring the Library? It's because as you grow in your skill sets, as you grow as a designer, as a content creator, whatever you're doing, you should allow yourself to be challenged. You should allow yourself to be in the uncomfortable position of answering questions you did not pre-plan. And this will make you a little bit stronger. This will give you a new way to see things and also reappreciate the things you've done yourself. Not everyone gets the opportunity to reflect upon how awesome your life has been. And I always like bringing people in because it reminds me that I have done a lot and that I have a lot to share, and I want to share that. So, with no further ado, I'm going to be bringing John on. So, give us a second here to switch screens. And there we go. Let me turn on your audio. John, say hello.
Hey everybody. Hi. I go by Az for John. I respond to either. Yeah, it's really nice to be able to hop on and ask some questions.
So, I don't know if there's a little bit you want to explain about yourself. Like, how did you get into Genesis? Let's talk about that. What?
Oh, okay. So that's actually a kind of a an odd story. I have known a guy named Chris, who is the owner and operator of Dragons in Ohio for I think almost 8 years now, 7 or 8 years now. And he's a really cool guy. And I got to know him actually doing his LARP, Alamore, which he is the founder and operator, and I've worked with him on that for a couple of years now. And he partnered with you guys while I was off doing my own thing and away for a little while. And he came back and he goes, "Hey, there's this card game. It's brand new. You need to play it. It'll be right up your alley." And I started playing, and I was having a really great time. And I again started doing my own thing off for a little while. And I happened across your all stream on a completely separate thing. I was actually working doing some I guess not they're not called TED Talks, but they're for game designers. And I was watching a bunch of stuff, and you guys popped up because you were it was on a Friday and you were talking about your how your game design stuff happens. And I was like, "Oh, I know that name. I'll click on it." And that kind of started down the rabbit hole of both being super interested in your Friday talks about game design and also the game that I was already playing and just not super into the community necessarily. So it was really great.
And I would like to know which champion did you start playing with when you started the game?
So originally it was, and this is the part that really bothers me is I'm so used to Magic that I only go by color
That's
combination in
fine.
my head.
That's fine.
So, um, it was purple blue originally, but it was the weaker discard outlet. The older lady.
Oh,
I can never remember her name.
Kendra.
Kendra, yes. That was the one that Chris offered me. He knows the decks that I play. He's played my Magic deck. He goes, "Hey, this is what you're going to be interested in," and it was great, and I have a whole lot of fun with that deck. But she was just a little too squishy. She died a little too quickly for me to be able to kind of set up the game. And so I moved to the he's the same color, but if you deal damage, you can draw a card. If you kill a creature with 2 HP
Oh,
or less, you can.
core.
Yeah, and he works much better. I can drag the games out forever, and no one gets to have any fun, and it's beautiful. I love it. It's absolutely great.
Nice.
But yes, so that tends to be kind of how I play the game is a lot of call to bones and discarding your hand, and you're sitting over there like it would be great if I had cards to play. I'm like, so,
Nice, nice.
so yeah.
No, definitely one of my favorite color combinations. I used to play a lot of rain, uh, and then eventually switched over to playing more long. And I don't know why. He's so opposite of everything I play in any other game, but I enjoy playing with long in Genesis, and it's just a different feeling.
Yeah, Genesis is a very unique game. It's still one of those things where I can't tell if my deck is bad or if I'm bad or a combination thereof. Because it's so different than anything else really on the market right now, which is great, which is really awesome because I found that the game is 80% planning on where you're moving next and 20% what it is in your hand,
Yeah.
um, which is super fun. Speaking of, that goes to my probably the first question is,
So, before we jump into that, I just want to let you know that the community from Dragon Den is watching right now. So,
I that's what I was doing. I was telling everyone to go over there
nice, nice.
and start watching. So yeah,
Well, you
that
can
was the
say
goal.
hello to everyone. They are watching.
Hi guys, I'm glad you're here.
All right, let's jump into these questions. Shoot.
Yeah, so one of the things that I when I first started playing is I was like, why isn't this a deck builder? And
Hmm.
I wondered if that was someplace you started or something you had even thought about when you were building it.
Yes. Actually, so the game we were originally planning to launch the company with was a game called Odyssey, and it was supposed to be a deck builder, dungeon crawler type of experience. As you win through more dungeons, you gain levels, which gave you access to bigger cards, which you could modify your deck with, and you just kept on growing. And it was a really cool concept. Um, the reason why we didn't launch with that is I met with a friend of mine, and he was just started up a new company that was doing really well. He just exploded. He got investment. He was actually on Dragon's Den, which is Canadian version of Shark Tank, and he got investment from one of the dragons. It was such a big deal. So I went to sit with him, and he was like, "You can launch off of a product you know will do well in the market, but you won't do well yourself. You have to launch with a product you're passionate about." And I have always been passionate about TCGs. I have played them my entire life. The first game I remember playing was Magic back in Ice Age, and I've always enjoyed the feeling of having cards in my hand, but also being able to have that uniqueness in your own deck. There's just so many elements about a TCG that I enjoy that when I talk about Genesis, I'm so much more enthusiastic about it. I'm so much more passionate about it. And that was relevant for starting up a company. But when it comes to just game design, I would say design what you're most interested in at that time because that's where your passion is. But if you want to have a company where you're working on it day in, day out for, in my case now, 5 years, you can't just pick something that's a fleeting feeling. You have to pick something you know you can commit to for a long period of time, and that's where TCGs have always been for me.
No, that actually makes a lot of sense. And I think being able to go, this feels like a deck builder. Because like I think it was originally what a roguelike deck builder kind of as you go, you get more that you can kind of mix into your deck. I think Genesis has a kind of a I don't want to say a weird, but like that like that middle ground that
Yep.
I think is really unique, and I like I said I enjoy it quite
And
quite a lot.
actually, one of our community members made a using D&D. I want to say fifth edition rules. He made a campaign using Genesis cards where you started off by making a your own champion, and then you had a deck that you started with, and then as we defeated creeps, we gained cards. And I was like, this is literally what that dungeon crawler was, and like it had all those elements right there. So it made me realize like we're not that far off. It's just right now the passion is into TCG, but in the future, who knows? There's other
Yeah, and
elements.
that you can always make that like a format later or
Mm,
something crazy. You could put out a single product. Yeah, that's
yeah.
actually I think that would be super interesting to play. Um, so these are going to get into the
Okay.
more aggressive questions now.
Go for it.
So when you start working on a card or a game itself, just generally speaking, do you start with a game feature that you enjoy or a card feature that you enjoy, or do you come up with an overarching concept and then work from either point? So
Ooh.
which do you find yourself kind of going towards more often?
So we talked a little bit about this before we went live, but you were mentioning
Yeah.
how it's something you do, which is looking at other games and seeing where you could improve them or fix them. My brothers knew that I loved doing this so much that one day they actually bought me a card game called, oh, it's Marvel Deck Builder. Does anyone
I
know
know
that
what game you're talking
Marvel?
about.
You know what is
I
it called?
know exactly what you're talking
Legacy,
about.
right?
I can't.
Legendary?
Yeah, something like
Legendary?
that. It's something like that. I know what you're talking about. I've
Yeah.
played it a couple times
They
with
bought it,
Katie,
they
friend of
played
mine.
it, and they're like, this is good, but there's something missing. And they gave me the copy for free and were like, fix this. Um, I've always been that person who loved playing games, but finding where the little off niche spaces and then trying to remedy that and fix it. So that's where a lot of my early designs came from. Genesis itself started from a very early iterative growth. So it was the first version was very much a actually it wasn't a reskin of Magic. It was a reskin of Yu-Gi-Oh because that's what we were playing at a time. Then we played a different game, and I took that attribute and added it in, and it just became this Frankenstein of a game. Not really having a home, not really having a I say Frankenstein, but I mean Frankenstein's monster. Um,
Yeah,
of
I know.
a,
Yeah,
a game with all these different components from a bunch of other games kind of melded into one. And then eventually we played a game called Anachronism. And Anachronism is it was launched by the publishers was the History Channel, which is not a company you would think would make a TCG, but they did. Um, Really cool concept, but and they had the early foundations of what a tactical card game could be like. And this is where my old habits came in, and I was like, I want to fix this. So we changed a lot of attributes of Anachronism and then implemented that old Frankenstein monster into it, and it just gave way to Genesis. So it was a very long iterative growth. So whatever direction you come from, I think any direction works. It's just trying to create a bigger game. It doesn't just happen from one seed. It has to come from multiple different directions at once. But like as a side note, I actually made a murder mystery game. I called it Red Rum, off of The Shining.
yeah.
And the idea of that game was it's a murder mystery that's superimposed on top of a party. So you have a normal dinner party, whatever you're doing, and uh, at the beginning when all your guests arrive, you give them cards, and one of them's a murderer, one's a detective, and the murderer has to do things like they would normally do in a party, like serve someone a drink, and that would kill their victim, and then then the detective has to figure out who the murderer is. And this came from I wanted to fix murder mysteries. I didn't like how normal murder mysteries games played, so I wanted to make my own, and this was my version of it. So it comes from any direction. It's just if you're going to make a hobby game, you have to come from multiple directions, not just one.
No, that actually that makes decent sense. I'm
Good.
glad
I
I'm
made
glad we
decent
share
sense.
our yeah. I'm glad we share our innate need to fix other people's problems, even when they don't want us to.
I
If Chris is here, he understands.
on one end, I do agree. It's this feeling of fixing someone else's problem. On the other end, I like to see more of um, an expansion off of an original thought, right? They
Yeah.
created this game, and you have to give credit where credit's due. That's why you'll never see me truly badmouth any other TCG, especially Magic, Yu-Gi-Oh, Pokemon. Credit where credit's due. They're great games. They've gone on this long. Anything I do is an homage to that. It's paying respect to those games, and I think as designers we need to have that same respect for for the designers that came before us, and the ones we're working concurrently with.
No, yeah, I could not agree more. Um, so I think you actually kind of answered the next question um quite quickly. So I'm going to move on to a thing that we talked about briefly before, but I'm having quite big problems
Okay.
on myself. So did you either when did you or how did you or did you? I think you take this how you want. Did you get outside players to test first, or did you force your inner circle to do it until they vomited on you and wanted you to stop?
um, so it's interesting if you've heard the story of how I've gotten this far in Genesis. A big tipping point or the early conversation of why I started taking my game design passion a little bit more seriously was when me and my friends were playing Yu-Gi-Oh. It was Yu-Gi-Oh at first, then Magic, then almost every TCG we play. We play it. We spent a lot of money on it, then realized we have no more money, and then I would bring my own game to the table, and we would play that until we got to a point where we had money again, and then we would go play a different game. Uh, it was very much like this idea of it was the thing me and my friends played between other games. What it later turned into when I was in university was uh, there was me, Lionel, who's been on past streams, Chris, who's our CSO, and Lionel's twin brother, Lincoln. The four of us were best friends in high school. Right after high school, we started having a bit of a falling out, and I wanted to find a way for all four of us to stay connected, to stay friends, and be in each other's life for as long as possible. So we started up Friday night Origins, and it was just the thing we did. Some nights we would play one game and then just stop and just chat for the rest of the night. Other times we would play like 20 games and be up till 7 in the morning playing. It was the goal of it was for us to meet together. I just leveraged that for us to do playtesting. So it started there. Then I did an when I was in university, I did an internship in Seattle, and when I was there, my brother was also living there, and he was at that time he was working at Amazon, and his close knit friends were all developers, uh, very high end developers, and I showed them Genesis, or at that time it was called Origins, and they're like, "This is a really cool concept." They had all played Magic in the past, but what really changed things was one of them was actually a QA. He was a software tester, and for him, the puzzle of testing a tactical card game was very intriguing. So he started taking it very seriously, which made the rest of the group take it very seriously. And at that time in Seattle, every Saturday we got together to do playtesting. So when I was in Seattle, I worked with that group. When I was back here in Ontario, I was working with my best friends here. And then something I don't omit very frequently, but we'll put it up on live camera now. Um, when we went from testing, so when we switched Origins to Genesis, Genesis is a very, very condensed form of what Origins was. That old card game had so many more rules, so much more complexity. We cut off all the fat. We went to this very trimmed down version. That's what Genesis is. I did not test it before bringing it to the market. Okay, that's not 100% true. I did 2 days of beta testing, one at ANC Cards in downtown Toronto, one at face-to-face Toronto in East York. 2 days of beta testing. Then I took a year off where I was taking care of my mom. She was sick, and after she passed away, I just didn't want to do any game design. Eventually, I came back to it, but really just did 2 days of testing at those two stores, and then launched the game. And that's more or less it. But I had all those years of experience before testing Origins. All those did still apply. It's just Genesis itself did not see a lot of testing in alpha. That's why a lot of cards are very improperly priced. Things like Primordial Force or Bolt Shot. One on the extremely low end, one on the extremely high end. They were using formulas from Origins, not for Genesis in particular. So to answer your question about like when you shift, and I know where this stems from because we talked about it before this live stream. There is value add in getting your people outside of your social group to playtest, but it's more about what's good enough. What is your measurement of this is a successful test run? And if you are not measuring that, if you don't have a sense around that, then this is where you get into the difference of playing versus play testing. And I'm actually going to give a shout out to Board Game Design Lab. I actually did a podcast with them about the difference between playing and play testing. So there is a significant difference between those two things, and making sure you're able to find the difference, making sure you're reaching out to the right community to work with you. There's so much nuance to it. But at the end of the day, you gotta have fun. If you're not having fun designing a game, then then you got a problem.
Yeah, that was actually pretty helpful. And plus, now that you've said that, I can go look at that podcast later. So and do more research. Um, So I think the other ones that are probably um the hot pressing ones for me particularly, because I know some of the people who actually know me in the stream know that I have been working on my own TCG player. I've been working on it for a while now, and so I'm kind of utilizing my resources here
Of
to
course.
try and to move forward and actually get that into a place where we can release and actually start doing the stuff that you guys are doing, come up behind you guys, and and then eventually supplant you and make all the money, and then Magic's next. That's the goals. But so the questions that I probably have the most right now is how and when did you start adding team members, and instead of being like, hey, these are my friends, these are the people that I'm working with, to hey, you're now the a part of this. You are now a member of this, and I mean you are working together, and we're gonna figure this out, and contracts and start, even if they're only voiced, but they become more of it's less of a we're working together on this fun thing to this is now a business.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, did that because a lot of so far has kind of seemed like it was a natural progression. Like with your playtesting, it was I'm playing with my friends, and then I get these QA guys who
Mhm.
kind of take it more seriously. So, and it seemed like a more natural progression. So was it the same with your kind of your actual team and company?
I just laughed because literally earlier today I was having a meeting with our lead game designer and our CSO, and I was like, "It's weird, but it feels like this is a real company now, doesn't it?" And they're like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Right." It feels weird. Um, Alex, Chris, if you're in the chat, when did things feel like an actual company to you? Um, it's it's weird. So the first all the game design of Genesis right up until the launch of Alpha, I did all of it. Um, I didn't have a team doing game design. I didn't delegate any of the card design. Everything that's in Alpha, all the cards that are in that set, I designed those. Um, and it took years of design work to do it, right? I started working on Genesis in one form or another since 2002, and I launched it in 2018. So it was a long time period of designing and percolating and thinking of all these ideas, and me talking to my friends like a crazy person saying, "No, no, no, the game told me to design the game this way." Like, it's
I know exactly what you're talking
yep.
about.
You start seeming like a crazy person. I did a lot of that on my own. The moment it changed was when the game launched and I was at SkyCon, the first convention where we started selling alpha product. Um, and the that convention, I met someone, Carl, and you'll see his name on the game design cards. And as the author of all the Akashic Codex chapters, he comes to me on Saturday. He's like, "Your game seems interesting," and he's just like standing around watching people play. And he comes again on Sunday, and he's like, "Okay, teach me how to play the game." So he comes, plays, wins, enjoys the game, buys a copy, and then we end up chatting about game design stuff. And I don't see him again for a couple of weeks. And then I was at the hobby shop that he frequents, and we just ran into each other. And he's like, "I want to be part of your game design team. I think that I can add value." And he was more looking at the fact that there were so many typos in that original first print that he was like, "I want to make your game look nicer." Uh, and then I was like, "Are you interested in being part of the game design team?" And then someone else approached me, Rob. Oh, why can't I remember Rob's last name? Um, oh, Rob, if you're watching, I'm so sorry about this. I can't remember his last name off the top of my mind. But he also approached about being part of the game design team, and it was an organic feeling because if I started recruiting my friends and forcing them to be part of it, it was more of like they would do it out of an obligation of just being my friends. Like, I know you, I love you, I trust you, I'm gonna do this with you, but their priority was me over the game. I needed people who prioritized the game over me. And until I found the right people, it wasn't worth shoehorning people in. And I found that time and time again. Every time I tried to, I found someone who I was like, "You're really cool. I want you to be part of the game." I want you to be part of this company, and I court them, and I'm trying to entice them to be part of the project. Finally, they become part of the project, and they're like, they were just in it to constantly get complimented. They were in it because they wanted to feel good about themselves, but they weren't in it to make the game any better. And those are people who eventually you let go. Unfortunately, like Lionel, he knows there's always an open door for him to come and work on this game. He's been my best friend and more or less a brother for 20 years now. And he knows that. I always let him back in to help out with the project if he's ever up for it. But at the same time, he is also one of those people that I gotta remind time and time again that you need to be there for the game first, the company first, the friendship is second. We'll always be friends, but you need to prioritize the game. Now the team that I have, our lead game designer, Alex Miller, he actually came second place in the championship. Amazing guy, loves the game, and that's the thing. He will always fight for the game's quality first. There are times where we're in a meeting, and um, though he seems aggressive in live streams, he's not as aggressive in our meetings. But there are times where I know he's looking at me, and it's like, "You're an idiot. You're doing this wrong." Or he'll say to me, "I disagree with what you're saying. I don't think that's good for the game." And those are the people I love having on the team because they make the game better. They'll make the company better. I can put my feelings aside. I can put who I am aside for a day, a night, a week, and as long as the game's doing well, that's all I care about. So that would be my recommendation. Uh, Let it happen naturally. Let it happen organically. Let people play your game and fall in love with your game, and then ask to be part of your team. Let them find the courage to ask you. Um, or I did have one case. Sorry, I ramble a lot. I had one case where I got someone came up to me and is like, I know someone who wants to be part of your game design team, but they're too shy to ask you. And I was like, this felt like I was in high school all over again. But and then I figured out who it was. I reached out to that person. I was like, do you want to be part of the game design team? They said yes, and I was like, yeah, it worked out so well. But for the most part, like, let them find the courage to ask you and show their love for the game, and those are the people you want on your
Yeah, no, I think that answers quite a few questions, and of course, and just the way you answer also is it's a big indicator of how things have kind of have worked through over time.
I will add
Um,
one caveat to that, though. There will be people who are so passionate about the game that they actually want to not take it away from you, but shape it in their vision of how the game should go instead of yours. Be careful about that too.
as someone who does that with my friend's game, I can understand that. I rewrote his entire book from scratch and then gave it back to him. He goes, "This is really nice," and then throws it out the window. So, so yeah, no, I will take that as under the under advisement. And I actually this kind of is actually a good place to kind of go into the other aspect that we're working on, which I think I mentioned very slightly. How did I think I asked a question about this on a couple streams back, but how did you go about on the early stages getting artists? Because those are someone you have to court, and they don't necessarily have to love your game. They just have to kind of add this piece to it. So how I think you said something about Fiverr when you
Yeah.
originally talked about.
So when I was looking for our very first artist, Arthur Tanka, great guy, and I miss him dearly. I put up a post on a website called Guru.com. He responded to it, and a bunch of people responded to it. A lot of artists who were um, a lot further in the career than Arthur. But I had one major criteria, and that was I would need to be able to meet with the person face to face. I did not want a digital relationship. I wanted a pure face to face relationship because it's so much easier to communicate with people face to face. You can read body languages, you can understand people's moods, and then you also get to know them better. I got to meet his family, he got to meet mine. It creates a tighter bond. So he was the first one who came into the project. From there, we started finding other artists who were one-off contracts using Fiverr and Guru again, and we would give them a contract. They did really well, and give them another one. They do well again. And it's like, you know what? Do you want to? It was kind of that. What to call it? the Nick Fury moment where we would go to the artists and be like, I'm assembling a team. And then eventually we
Nice.
started bringing some of these people into our chat server. We're using Slack. And that's where we met Ramiana, who did amazing pieces for Hunting Hound, Burrook, Giant Scorpion. Great cards, great artwork. We met Damian, who did his intro piece was Essence Drain. He went on to do all the champions.
I love that card.
Yeah, right. Isn't that the artwork was just so good? We're like, we're gonna make a champion out of this card. Like the artwork came first, and then I was like, I love this so much. I want to make a champion out of it, and that's where Core was born. And
Oh, I love it. I'm
yeah,
so thankful to him.
and that's where we also met. I think those are the two artists that became long-term artists. Arthur worked with them, built them up, and then part of it was also giving them ownership of the world, right? Telling them that as they built pieces, they could influence our perspective of the world. Because I had a vision of how the world worked, but one person alone can't build an entire world. You need a community. And the artists are essential for that because they'll bring life to your world. So when I started telling Arthur, when I told Damian, I love this artwork so much, I want to make it into a champion later on. He was sold. He was like, I'm in this for the long run. And then he started bringing in his friends because referrals are 1,000 times more productive than finding new contracts. So if you have one artist, get them. They'll know other artists. Get them to bring in other artists. Um, and then the other big thing we did was the first person to ever work with me on artwork. What happened was, I was in Seattle. I was at an F&M. I was telling people about this card game I'm building. This one guy approaches me and he says, "My girlfriend's going to university for art, trying to build up her portfolio. Can she work with you?" And I met her. I interviewed her. It was a weird feeling interviewing someone. And we became close friends afterwards. She's an amazing artist, and I keep in touch with her to this day. Um, she did the artwork for Malevolent Spirit, and
One of my other favorites.
yeah,
Yep.
she did Skeleton King, and she did Angel of Retribution. Leslie, actually, before she did Malevolent Spirit, I was at the verge of kind of giving up on the project. I didn't care too much about it. It was consuming too much of my time. And then she did that first artwork, and I saw it come to life, and I was like, now I'm invested. I'm really, really invested into this project. Uh, so I brought her back into the project, telling her, we'll give her as much time as she needs to work on our art pieces as long as she's, part of the team. So she did Angel, she did the anime Malik, Nubia, and Idris. So uh, unfortunately, some of those early artists, they're not with the project anymore, but it's for good reasons. They went off to do bigger things, and that's the other side about artists. You can find the artists who, um, so average artist, it will ask for about $1,000 per commission. That's around normal to do a good quality artwork. Things like Angel or Rain, you would normally have to pay $1,000. We didn't have to pay as much, but part of the reason why is we really worked with the artists to be like, we want you to be here for as little time as possible and walk away with a job that's going to pay you 10 times as much. So let's do that. Let's make that our priority and turn all the artwork that you do for this game as part of your portfolio so you can go off and do better projects. And every time one of my artists turn around to me and say, "Hey, I can't work on this project anymore because I got more artwork that's paying me, 6 times the amount," I'm like, "Go do that. I am happy for the time you put into this project, but you deserve that." And we always part in really good terms. So much so that a lot of them say, when the budget frees up, reach back out to me. I'd love to come back on the project. Our core team, though, are comprised of people who they're staying on this project because they've grown with the project. They were part of Welcome to Jalara and Raise. They got to see the world. They got to build the world. They took ownership over parts of it, and I don't think they ever see themselves leaving the project. So uh, that's kind of the journey with a lot of the artists. And to this date, I know like Alex, who does the arenas and the pillars, She loves doing those landscapes, and she is amazing at it. And she does a lot of cutesy animals, which is adorable. Mario does a lot of the really ferocious animals and a lot of the cool action poses, and I love his work. He does a great job. Mikhail, who's a newer artist, you're going to see him featured a lot in Origins. He does a lot of really great concept pieces and cool, like, epic hero moments. And Damian, who just brings the team together and kills it. And oh, sorry, I forgot Philip. Philip is like Damian's right hand man. He can really bring a new level of depth to characters and show you emotion and life and honesty. So all the artists, I love them. They are great, great people, and them taking ownership of the project and being able to feel like the world's partly theirs. I think that's the reason they've stayed with us. And when the time comes that they need to move on, I'm not going to be sad about it because it means that you know they've grown and they deserve it.
That's that is a like a fantastic little like snippet that I kind of just want to take out and set to the side for later. I'm glad that I'll be able to rewatch these. And actually, so just real quick, this is something that I kind of I have. I don't want to say. We'll use Magic as an example. Like with your the theme of your all's game, your art is pretty consistent in stylization, whereas with Magic, it's kind of really like you can have two cards that are in the same set, and you're like, they don't really, the art is different, the theme is different. It's just very, and some people really like that, and some people really hate that, and some people really like that you like everything kind of has a similar feel in Genesis, where it's all the world feels, the art feels like it's connected, which makes the world feel a little bit more connected. Whereas Magic just feels so massive because all of the art's different and everything like that. Was there a reason that you chose it to be that way, or did it just kind of again just happen more naturally in that way?
I think it honestly happened more naturally, especially if you look at Alpha and Beta. A lot of the artwork's darker, and that's because personally, I'm a bigger fan of uh, more gothic, more horror type of artwork. I was the person who, if you like, when I was in high school, I just had vampire posters everywhere. Like, I love that gothic horror, and you see that a lot in Alpha and Beta. When we got to Welcome to Jaelara, Arthur unfortunately left the team at that point. Demian stepped in as the art director. He felt that the game was getting too dark and wanted more of a lighter feeling, so it became a little bit more lighter. And then uh, when I told him that the community was like, no, 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 it was good the dark way, he was like, oh, good, I want to get back to that. So things took a shift to a darker tone in Rays. Uh, and I think the consistency you're seeing or feeling is the fact that everyone has a consistent emotional connection to the world. The artists all work together to evaluate each other. Our process for the art team is we get the sketches, we get the idea, the concept, we send it to the artist. The artist creates three sketches. The team votes on which sketch that they like the most. Uh, if the artist agrees with the team's voting, then they proceed with that particular sketch. Then they add the first level of color, and that's where the world kind of gets put into place. We try to align the artwork to the affiliations of that card, and then we push forward with trying to make sure that the world feels connected. Now, there are some artists that are very out there. If you remember from Rays, there were particular cards, Flight, Taki Psyche,
Yep.
and Fire Master's Dance, Peaceful Demand. These were all done by an artist, Layla. Layla was a really interesting artist because she hand painted everything, like on actual canvases, and then took a photo of them, scanned them in, and then digitally touched them up. Her style was very different, and we wanted to just try something new. There's never any harm in just trying something new. Uh, but I think the consistency you're seeing is the depth in communication in the art team and the game design team. The more they talk to each other, the more they understand each other's vision of the game, the closer everything kind of feels together.
Okay, that makes pretty decent sense actually. Because I guess if you're talking with each other, you kind of get everyone's input, and it can kind of work in a little bit better way when you're again doing such a broad project. Um, so this is probably one of the ones that I was a little bit more hesitant to ask because it can kind of get a little personal. So if it's too personal, just X it out. So what the and again, I think this comes back to me working on my own and also full-time job, which we almost made me late for this, and just day-to-day life and bills. So what was for you, or what do you think, having done it, would be the minimum investment to get the ball rolling on your first set?
hundred thousand
Um,
dollars.
$100,000.
It's a scary number, but it's not like you need $100,000 the day of, right? It's
Hmm.
the thing we found. Um, we're not backed by some giant company where like it was all self-funded. I Things were very different, and I needed to still get food on the table. Like, uh,
Hmm.
my wife was there supporting me. She's been amazing every step of the way. The thing is, we had my savings, my wife's salary, plus a business loan, and those are the things that covered that 100,000 to the point that I was making some sales, right? And
Hmm.
then even when you start making sales, you're still sitting on all that debt from the very beginning.
Dead, yeah.
Um, Things don't turn around for a startup, and the average time for a startup to turn around that debt and start making some good money is 3 to 5 years.
Yeah.
That's that time frame. It's no different for this. Uh,
Okay.
if you're looking at what do you need for that first year, the first set, and still be able to, do things like pay rent and have food on
Food.
the table, maybe not even name. I remember there's this one time where my wife and I got so excited because we had enough money to buy name brand food. And we're like, yes, we could buy real cereal and not that Walmart stuff. Um, it's Things change a lot making that transition. I say 100,000 because I know how much it costs for the inventory. I know how much it costs for the art. I know how much it costs for rent and food and phone bills, internet, all that kind of stuff come together. It doesn't have to all be upfront, but you need to know where you're going to be able to get that money when you need it. And we are very, very blessed with getting business loans. Like Canadian government has a program for young entrepreneurs, and I just happen to fit that criteria. And when I talked to them about that, they were like, "Oh, you fit that criteria. You're making sales, and you're in a niche space that seems to be growing. You're perfect for our program." And they brought us in and started working with me. So those are all the factors I'd say to consider. I also say, unless you know with a strong level of emotional certainty, not like logistical certainty, but the emotional certainty that this is the thing you're going to do and you're going to be happy doing it and you really really want to do it. If you're not stepping in with both feet, then I don't recommend doing it because there have I have gotten so much more gray hair, even though you can't see it because I'm all shaved. Um, and I've
It's
gained
fine.
so
I'm quickly coming up behind you.
I've gained so much weight and my health deteriorated so much, and lack of sleep, and uh, I've lost friendships, like not permanently, but just people falling out of my life. Uh, and would I do it all again? Yes, of course. I love this. I've never been happier in my life, but there are sacrifices that need to be made. So it's the same with every startup. You're going to hear the same thing. Doesn't matter what industry you're in. The only times where it's really different is if you have family money backing you, or you got some massive investment. But even then, that's a different level of stress that you're dealing with. I mentioned my friend earlier who got an investment. He was saying that even though when he got investment, the company changed. It was no longer working out of a workshop. It was actually they had an office space and they had employees and real salaries. Uh, it was a different feeling. The entire company had a different feeling, different level of stress. Right now, you have to answer to shareholders, and you have to report on all these other things. Um, I'll say like this was the advice I kept on hearing, which is if you're really passionate about it, you'll know. You'll know in your heart that you have to do it. Just be ready for the stress. It's gonna be the highest highs and the lowest lows of your life, but just be ready for it, and it's fun. I will also say that ever since I started the company, I've built a better relationship with my father, with my in-laws. I've had a better relationship with my siblings. A lot of those core moments got better in my life because I was happier. Because again, it was one of those things I had to do. It was just in there for me as like this was my destiny in a way.
No, I appreciate the honesty and the blatant $100,000
I said that
because
to
and
sorry.
well, no, it's if it makes sense that you go it this is what you need. This is what you need to know up front what you're going to be having to deal with when you get into this and what you're going to need to really get going and rolling and I appreciate the honesty as because there's a lot of people who are like, oh yeah, no, you can do it, you can figure it out, and I'm like, that's unhelpful. I really appreciate if you would just tell me the truth. And so I appreciate the honesty. It's actually incredibly helpful.
Um, so we are, I we're going over time significantly. We're supposed to be done at 6:30. It's
Oh, really?
6:50. So,
Oh, wow, that went really quickly.
in the chat there was one comment that I saw. I was curious about those. They definitely stood out as different. Sorry, I may have missed when that comment came in. Uh,
I think that
like
was the
or
art about
oh,
her art.
okay. Yeah, it's good to know that holistically the artwork for the game feels like it makes sense. I've had people come up to me and being like, "There's like," I get personally not offended but saddened when I hear people talk poorly about some of the artwork in the game because I've built relationships with a lot of the artists there. They are great people, and even if they never stuck with us or they just did one piece and then left or whatever, I'm still they're still people and they worked hard on those pieces. So I would say yes, if you don't like a particular art piece, I would recommend to hear to the old adage of if you don't have anything nice to say, then just don't say anything because those artists, they're great people and they deserve respect even if you're not a fan of their art piece, it doesn't mean that it's bad.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think, and I don't know if you guys have ever seen it or played it, but the game called Force of Will, um,
I've seen it,
is
yeah.
it a lot of it is hanging on its anime
Yeah.
stylization of its art. That's really what its draw is, and that's why I got into it. And the gameplay, not for me anymore, but yeah, and that's there. I think for every person, there's going to be a piece of art that they really enjoy. Like again, Drain Essence. It's in my deck. I love that art. I love the card. It's fantastic. I think it's absolutely awesome. But it's also a darker card with
Mm.
a lot of emotion behind it, and something like Fly, where it's like very happy card. It looks happy. It has the
Yeah.
emotion of happy behind it. I'm like, you're not for me. You're not for my deck. just,
Yep.
just because that's not who me as a deck builder, me as a player is. And I think everyone needs something to draw with. And if you don't agree with an art piece, it's fine. It's art. Who cares? Not every like I don't like what is it? What is it called? It's always a joke. It's the what's the modern art like oh, what is it? It's the where it's just like slashes of paint on a thing. It's like a banana
Oh,
taped
okay.
to a wall.
Yeah,
I can't think of the word, but I'm like, not for me. I'm gonna go look at the Mona Lisa. It's
yeah.
just a personal opinion. It's not that it's bad. It's just a personal opinion. But yeah, no, I appreciate spending more time than I was allotted answering my questions. Thanks.
And I'm available if you ever want to chat. And
Of course.
we will have more conversations in the future. All
Yeah,
right.
definitely. You'll see me in the chat.
I'm just gonna wrap up the slides here. So, as always, I think if anyone in the chat has any questions, feel free to throw them up. We'll try to answer those as best as possible. Uh, as I'm wrapping up here, I want to mention Meta Mondays. Every Monday, come join Will. He does a great job at finding the analytics and how the game ticks. Very, very important data that we're using to make the game better. So thank you so much to everyone who supports that. And if you're not part of the process but would like to be, join the Discord server, ask Will, or reach out to me and I will connect you with the right people. Tuesdays, we talk about exploring the library. This Tuesday, we're going to be, the pitch contest will be done. We'll be talking about all the winners, our excitement for it, and what things are going to be moving forward. So if you want to hear who all the official winners are for the pitch contest, come to Exploring the Library on Tuesday. Game design talk that we're having right now, every Friday, 6 p.m. Normally 30-minute sessions, but we had to have this one go longer because it was just such an amazing chat. And then Future League happening right after this. Alex Miller is running that. He is doing a great job making sure that the game is healthy as it grows. So go support him and help test cards, or just join the conversation. You don't have to actually play. You just need to be part of that chat. Upcoming tournament. The next one is on June 12th. That'll be at 2 p.m. That'll be a standard tournament. We'll try our best to stream it. If not, just come join, participate. They're free to enter and with great pricing always. Next, Caustic Codex is coming out this Monday. It'll be the first chapter that's part of the Raise story. So come read and experience the new champions as they enter the arena for the first time. And then our next town hall, which is June the 7th, and that will be at 6 p.m. on Monday. That may get canceled depending on how things go. I have some personal stuff that might happen that day, but if it does, I'll make sure everyone knows. Otherwise, come join me June 7th at 6 p.m. and we'll chat about everything related to Genesis, anything you want to talk about the game. Few last things. The pitch contest, it's wrapping up. If you are a Patreon member, go into Patreon and vote. You don't have any deadlines of when you can vote. You're allowed to come out and vote at any time. And for everyone else, go to Facebook, go to Reddit, and help narrow that search down from the top 5 down to the top 2, and then the Patreon members will determine the winner. And then 2 last things. Second edition, it's coming soon. It's coming Q3, which it's very, very soon. Very, very soon. And once we have that date for launch, we will let you know. And then the last thing, next week's topic, I'm going to be talking about smoke testing. We were talking about testing today. So next week, I'm going to be talking about smoke testing, sanity testing, exploratory testing. These are 3 critical functions of agile testing applied into the computer science world. I want to talk about it in the TCG space, how we apply it, how we look at those metaphors and bring them into this space. That's everything for this week. I want to thank again John for joining us. Thank you so much. It was a wonderful chat, and I look forward to deeper conversations with you in the future. And
yeah, absolutely wonderful. Thanks for having me.
And thank you to everyone who's part of the chat who came to watch today, and we'll interact with you at the next live stream, the next conversation, or on Discord. Have a great day, and we'll see you then. Bye. So for anyone who's still around, we realize we still have more questions to go through. So John and I are just gonna continue our conversation. We're still here if you want to ask questions yourself. And this is kind of just more extra of the live stream going on. So I'm gonna keep that awesome newbie artwork going on. I'm gonna turn down the background music. But yeah, this is like the director's cut, right? Like the extended version.
Extended version. Nice. Yeah, so kind of what they didn't get to hear was I was asking about the two-part purchase of the game, and kind of bouncing off of that. This is something that I was contemplating, that if and when my game takes off, thing, cornering the market on your secondary market, instead of allowing things like TCG Player and other things like that, where to being able to purchase singles. Have you ever thought about actually actively selling singles on your website, where people can, because your game is so sporadic and like in location, like my locals, there are cards I just can't get. I just can't, like, there's just nowhere I can get them because I only have one local, and I know all the singles that they have. So I was like, and you guys aren't on TCG Player yet, and so I was wondering if you guys had ever thought about actually putting up your own shop.
So there is actually, you know how people say that booster packs are like gambling? There's one very strong reason, like one, let's say like linchpin reason why they're not gambling. And that's because on the manufacturer end and on the production end, every card, every item inside the pack has the same price. So from one rare to another, Giant Scorpion to Cogger Drake to Chrono Walker, in our mind at Haunted Castle Gaming, are all worth the exact same value. The secondary market then reevaluates it and places at another value. And that's completely for them to decide what it is. We have no control over it. The moment we decide to change the value from one rare to another, if on our end, hypothetically, we said, actually, I'm not even going to say it because I don't want this to be construed in a different way. But if you take Magic, for example, you have Thoughtseize and Bitter Blossom. Those are just the two cards that come to my mind. Worth different amounts on the secondary market. If Wizards of the Coast went out there and said that those cards on the secondary market are worth X and Y, they're now saying that their booster packs can contain more or less value, which then says that your dollar in does not always mean you have the same value out, which is then considered gambling. As long as the dollar in and the value out are equal, then it's purchasing a product. It's purchasing a consistent product. So on our mind, we evaluate all rares equally, and that's why I cannot sell any singles, because the moment we start doing that, it messes with things. Now, people will counter that by saying Wizards has done things like their secret layers, where they're selling
but you can only buy that via the secret layer.
They're saying
effectively
they're selling individual cards for a specific individual cards for a specific price, which then sets the value of all those cards to the same price. But so if Wizard sells a secret layer with 6 cards for not for $300, let's say $60 to make numbers easy, even though we all know the secret layers are not worth $60. But let's say hypothetically they sold 6 cards for $60. They're saying each card in that box is worth $10. Now the secondary market could say, hey, you may have sold it may sell for $60, but because of the lack of supply, we're now going to increase the value from $10 a card to $100 a card. That's the secondary market's choice. That's not what Wizards is doing. So that's where things kind of have the nuances. If Wizards then explicitly said, here are no, even then,
basically, so if you had you had 4 or 5 cards that you sold on your website, you had 4 cards. and you value two of them at $2, one of them at $10, and one of them at $5, and you could buy a pack, and it was randomly
Yeah.
they were randomly assembled. So you could get a pack of five of the $2 cards
Hmm.
for the same price as you could get five of the $10 cards.
Yeah.
What you're saying is, at that point, you are actually gambling with your money,
Yes.
hoping to hit the big one
Yes.
rather than hitting the small one.
Yeah.
And no, and that makes actually that's a really good point that I hadn't thought about, because I was thinking, um, because, and this is again from a player perspective, I was thinking it would be nice to be able to go, I'm going to go to Genesis and buy my deck, and
Hmm.
I'll pay what they're charging for it, but because for the convenience of getting them.
Yeah.
And that's why, and that it was the convenience factor rather than the fact that
Mhm.
at that point you're actually causing it to become a gambling,
Yeah.
when you sell sealed product, which I hadn't thought about. That's just not something that, every like, I had
Yeah.
thought about, which is it's a really good point.
This.
And at that point, I think you would like, I think in the United States you actually have to say that I don't think you can sell it as a product anymore. You actually have to
You
sell it
have
as
to
a.
get licensed by your gambling
Yep.
organization in the states. Each state has different laws on age
Yep.
and all those things. It's a lot easier in Canada, but it's so complicated in the states. So
Yeah.
the part that always confuses me is mythic rares and Magic, and I don't know how they get around that, because now they are saying, I think it's because they print their um it's so weird for me, because they have
It's
to
a
then.
the only difference between a rare and a mythic rare is the percentage of it being an APAC. That's the only
Yes.
difference.
Yeah, and that's where it actually kind of gets confusing for me, because so for us we say, uh I guess the way they can look at it is that technically behind closed doors, all their cards from common to mythic, foil, special, legendary, rare, or whatever are all worth 1 penny to them. So it doesn't
Yeah.
matter the quantities of distribution. On their mind, it's all the production value of them all are the exact same. And as long as they're saying that from pack A to pack B, your value in to your money in to your value out are the same, then it's not technically gambling. But it's a nuance. And then the second thing is that Wizards does not make any claim that the cards have value once you open the pack. They have gameplay value, but they
Yeah.
don't necessarily have monetary value. And that's the
Yeah,
thing.
and if you went and go, no, this card is worth this on your website, you're actually giving that card a
Yes.
monetary value and a backing. That is you controlling the market, and I think that that's actually a point that
So
I hadn't
there's a lot
considered.
of awkward legal things that you kind of need to
And
think about, and
nuances.
yeah, especially when it comes to this industry. Well, it's the thing with every industry, and eventually, what you'll find is, and this is how I know when I'm talking to someone who's about to take that plunge or is ready to take that plunge into actually competing in the space, is that they spend less time designing their game and more time researching the history of this industry. How much is this industry worth? What changed it? Like, do you know the real reason why Magic succeeded? Like, why they've lasted so long? Like,
Uh,
okay, I don't want to say the real reason, but my theorized reason, and I guess you can't guess it because it's my theorized reason. But you take a stab at it.
well, I know. Well, I know when they came out, they weren't actually that big of a company. They were relatively small, and they originally kind of were biting off other people's apples. They kind of grabbed from other people because they did Pokemon for a while. They did some other stuff with Dungeons and Dragons. They were like they kind of were like a weird in between, and then they just kind of like mass produced a bunch of crap that no one actually liked. But basically they just kept putting stuff out into such a wide market, and I know there's probably a lot more behind it, but they just kind of kept by force pushing their product.
Yeah.
And then they started, and I think the tournament scene picking up for
Yeah.
them was a really big deal.
So the two things that, if you look into the history and try to understand from a business sense, two things that Wizards did that was so brilliant was, one, they created a strong business. Because if you look at the early version of Magic, it's not
Not
like,
fun.
it's not a perfect game. It's not the Magic we play today. It's There was no, like, you can run as many copies of a card as you want. They did not expect people to own more than one Black Lotus. There was so much about the original game they did not
Mana
test for
burn.
or design for. Anti, right? There's so much about
Yep.
that game that was very, very different. But why, like, they knew they were going to get sued, so they actually had the company register under one name, and then once they got sued and lost the money, they moved all their assets under the other name. They created the tournament scene. They did so much stuff outside of the game itself that was very, very strong, and they had really strong business sense. They published the game in 94.
Nine- yeah.
Yeah,
90
93 or
Alpha, I think the 93 was when they started producing some sets of Alpha, if I'm not mistaken. But when
So-
they really came out, it was 94, if I'm not mistaken. I should
yeah.
Google
It was
but I think
93.
94.
93 is the launch. If you look at it, they have a patent that was filed for TCGs, like it is trading card games or collect. I think it's trading card games. They have a patent filed for that starting in 94, which expired in 2014, because it's a 20-year patent.
Yeah, well, not just that. They had like four, because the term tap
Yeah,
tap
But-
was
so-
a patent that ran out too. Like they
Those
they
pat-
really hard patent things.
those small patents aren't as interesting. So the big patent is really interesting because they launched their game, all their competitors hit the scene, burning all their capital to try to get there. The patent resolves, they sue all their competitors, taking all their assets, and then they dominate that market. And if you also look into the history, no other company has released more TCGs than Wizards of the Coast. They have released,
correct.
I think,
Yeah, I knew
more than
that.
20 different games. And if you look into philosophy, a lot of people have a lot of different ideas in it. My theory is it actually comes from Apple's philosophy, which is, if anyone's going to destroy my company, it's me. That's
Me,
why the
yeah.
iPhone destroyed the iPod. No, if some other company created a smartphone that destroyed the iPod, it would have hurt Apple a lot. But since Apple was the one who did it, they kept their domain space. They kept their hands on that market. So
Yeah.
Wizards was really, really smart at being in business. So the only way anyone else can truly compete against them is being smart in business. And this is
Which is
where-
basically what Pokemon did. They went, "Hey, you're doing really well. Make this card game."
Yep.
They let him make a couple sets, and then they're like, "Hey, it's doing really well. Give it back. It's mine back." And then we're only going to produce 2 sets in Japan, so we're going to use your stuff, but outside of your patent area. And then we're going to start selling in the U.S. after we can afford to pay your lawsuits.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
So this is actually one of the areas where Flesh and Blood did phenomenal, because they were very, very smart in the way they grew. And their marketing campaign was brilliant. Their game, the assets they use are really, really strong. The fact that they decided when they launched in the US, they piggybacked off of Wizards and used the exact same printer that Wizards uses, but not any printer, their good printer, because Wizards uses
Mhm.
multiple printers now. So Flesh and Blood
Yes.
ended up using Wizards' best printer. And these things kind of culminate into a really strong, you can tell that the owner of Legend Story Studios is a really smart guy. He's not in it to make a good game, he's in it to make a good company that sells a good
Yeah.
game. And that's where we want to be. That's where, like, Genesis is a great game. I love it. I love playing it. It's my baby. But I am way more excited about Haunted Castle Gaming. Like, that's the emblem I have on top of my head. It's Haunted Castle Gaming,
Mhm.
right? Like, I love this company, and there's so much I want to do for the company. So for me, it's the business sense and having the right people. So our game designer, Alex Miller, when he was doing so much and he wanted to become take on more responsibilities, I was like, you're the right person, because you love this game. You will do whatever it takes for this game to be the best game in the world. Let me focus on making Haunted Castle Gaming the best engine to sell that game. You focus on making the best game. And that's where we kind of separated. And now I haven't played Genesis in quite a while, and it makes me a little sad. But I'm happy to know that the right person is steering that ship.
That's actually a good jumping off point for the next couple questions that I had was, because I think we actually already answered that question about whether you wanted to do a sub game deck builder or a micro game within the Genesis universe. I think we said that that's definitely out in the cards and you'd be willing to do. So the last two questions, there are last two on my list, not necessarily the last two, but have you ever, or are you thinking about building a new game, a new universe, or buying or co-sponsoring another's creation?
Ooh, okay, so
Not necessarily right this second,
yeah.
obviously, but like in the big schemes.
So there's a lot of things that come to my mind. Originally, I wanted to buy the licensing for Final Fantasy and make Genesis using Final Fantasy. That was my original plan. The idea of summoners, you have summoners in Final Fantasy, you have fighters, you have casters, all those disciplines are there. All the lore is great, and then they released their own card game, and I was like, oh shoot, okay, whatever. But that was my original sense. I am I am not opposed to the idea of working with other designers and trying to publish their games. So one of the things I talk about Haunted Castle Gaming, one of the things I want to spin off of it, and this might happen in the far future, but I want to create Haunted Castle Publishing and create a publishing company where we can help designers, because I think in the hobby space, in the game design space, I want to provide a new perspective. I think there are a lot of great publishing companies out there providing their own perspective on what the game industry needs to be like and what works and what doesn't. None of them thought that Genesis would sell a single unit. So it just goes to show that I see something in the world that they didn't. So in the future,
It's rough.
yeah.
It's rough. As someone trying to glow up over here. Getting into publishing, just talking to a publisher, that's something that I've of course tried. It's just getting that conversation near impossible, let alone getting your elevator speech in 5 or 6 minutes.
And the moment you say to them you're making a collectible card game, doors are closed.
Gone. Yep.
So,
One of the guys basically said it. He goes, "Hey, if you're not going to work for Magic, if you're not going to work for Pokemon, if you're not going to work for Yu-Gi-Oh, you're not building a trading card game. Like it's just the way it is."
and then this year, the past 2 years, we've seen the entire industry change with what they're calling the next wave of TCGs, which are MetaZoo, Flesh and Blood, and there's another one. Unfortunately, Genesis didn't make that list, but
no, there's been like what 12 or 13 really big and really aggressive card games. There's the brother sister company that I can never
Exodus.
remember their decks. Exodus, yeah, they're super nice people. I've spoken to the brother once, and again, I have like a weird life online where I accidentally fall into talking to people. But yeah, I spoke with him briefly in a Discord call that I was talking to a Smite team about other things, and he's a big fan apparently. But I talked to him for about 3 minutes, and I was like, that'd be cool. And then I saw a YouTube video talking about what was it? It's he usually does Magic. He sells product. That's all he does. But he makes a YouTube video. Rudy, yeah, he was talking. After Investor. Yep, he was talking about him, and I was like, hey, I know that guy. But yeah, like they were getting really big there for a while. Force of Will was supposed to be the new upcoming thing, and then some stuff happened, and then they were sold, and some worse stuff happened, and I have a very particular view on games. The game doesn't always have to be even. It doesn't have to be a balanced game, but I have to be able to at least try. And Force of Will is now about as quickly as possible OTK.
Mm,
Turn one, OTK. Combo off, I win. And that is the kind of the main core strategy is I have that one card you can't do anything about. I now win.
I see. I see.
And and some people find that
Yep.
really fun. I have a good friend of mine. I love Bill. If he's still listening, he's at the den right now. Um, if he's still listening, um, he absolutely adores it. That's the way he plays. He's a spike. I love my spikes. I get it. But it's just not for me. I want to be able to at least. I don't necessarily have fun winning the game. I have fun playing the game.
Yeah.
Um, AKA, I like my Genesis games to last 6 hours and for no one to get to have any fun. That's how I have
You
fun.
should play 2v2.
Uh,
Those go on for a while.
oh, it's so good. It's so good. And actually, I while I have you here, I can actually while you're here, I might as well. It's Mr. Senor, I make games. I will bring up my card assets. It's a giant folder. Um, the game that I'm planning on making, which is Mythos, is actually the core gameplay is 4v4. It's not four player, it's 1v1 v1 v1 basically. It's the
Mm,
commander setup.
okay.
And basically I've found through playing a lot of card games that 1v1 is fun. 1v1 is great, but 1v1 doesn't super allow a whole lot of. There's never that moment where you're truly astounded about what happened.
Mm,
Like even in Magic, where they're like, "Oh, I counterspell." You're like, "Okay, cool." He counterspelled, or he gets to do something really cool, or you get to do something really cool, and
yeah.
you're like, "Oh, that's super interesting." But in Commander, there's always that moment where the person diagonally from you pops off, and you're like, I really hope that doesn't come at me. There's that moment where it's like, it may not actually hurt me. It could do something cool that doesn't actually affect me. And I always thought that it creates a lot more fun. And you can talk to the person, like the people at the
Yeah.
table, and go, hey, you help me, I'll help you punch him in the face. Like, don't hurt me. And I won't. And that has always created basically a more entertaining player story
Yeah.
rather than like, oh, I won. Oh, but at a and then I kind of was working with a couple things where it's like, I want this to be the competitive scene where it's 4v4, that's competitive. But if you lose, you don't just get zero. And so I set it up more like I looked this up forever, but basically if you win the set, you get 4 points. If you lose the set, if you're the first one out, you get a point. And then it's instead of being it's a cumulative throughout so the entire day you actually are still playing. There's never a point where you're out of running, really, until you've got like 4 or 5 games left and you can be like, well, I'm not in the top 10. But so it fills out that competitive scene a lot more where instead of like in Pokemon and Magic, you play 4 games, you're like, I
Yeah.
lost three, I'm out. And so that's always been a really bad feeling. I drove from New Jersey to Tennessee to play in a Pokemon regionals. It was my first big Pokemon regionals. And I was out of the running within my first three because I had only had 2.5 hours of sleep. And I was so just disoriented and groggy that within my first 3 games, I played poorly and I'm done. I mean, I still played all day. I played till almost 10 p.m. and we started at 8 a.m. But there was never a point where I could come back. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? And so I was like, I really don't want that. I really want more player investment at the tournament scenes and competitive. I want competitive to be a lot more healthy. And so that was really what I'm kind of focusing on balancing around is having 4 people at the table and being able to interact and then trying to mitigate as many of the feels bads
Mm,
where it's oh, by the way, I counter everything you did. You don't get to play the game. So instead of we're in Magic, or you guys, because you guys have the stack as well, um, I've mitigated the stack for the most part, where it is I play a card, and then everyone else gets the chance to play a card.
mhm.
So after I play a card, then you play a card, then it goes to the next person, and they can play a card, then it goes to the next person, and then we resolve backwards. So it's using the same stack effect, but instead of being able to go, I play a card, and then I respond to me playing a card by playing a card. I've removed that small amount of depth because there's not really a two-player interaction. It's an entire table of people. Getting depth by going, okay, so what does that next person play? What does that next person play? So, and in Commander, that can get very, very complex. So, I've had stacks that I think it took us 20 or 30 minutes just to figure out what actually happened before resolving it. I don't know if you've ever played like a really aggressive Commander game, but you can look at 5 or 6 hours of gameplay
Yeah.
in a really complex and dense gaming scenario. So I was trying to avoid that as much as possible. Um, but real quick before we end, I wanted to show you my my hours upon hours of bashing my skull and trying to figure out how to do card design on my own. Um, but I've been working with GIMP, and for those of you who are still in the scene, there it goes. It's starting to come up. I wanted to show you my final card, one of my card designs, real quick before you get on with your day. Oh my goodness, computer, please don't die. Please don't die.
While you're loading that, you had another question about would I expand into other. So one,
Yeah.
what was that? Oh, would I make other games? Or
Yeah, have you ever thought about making another game inside of your in a different universe? Like basically would you start over from scratch in either build board games or a different TCG player? Or are you
uh,
just going to kind of trying to stay in that wheelhouse?
so we have a lot of big plans for the Genesis universe, and I'll mention that it's more than just TCGs. But at the end of the day, I'm looking at making a strong company, and companies work a lot better off of lifetime products. So I like the idea of hobby games. I've been tinkering around with some miniature games. I've been tinkering around with some RPGs, and then so what we do, we'll see. Yeah, I think
Oh
I'm
no,
gonna wrap up the stream here though. So kind of just let that tailor off. Anyone who's staying with us, thank you so much. I'm going to actually be ending the stream now. So have a good night, and we'll see you next week. Bye.